All right, let's get started. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar on getting started with Autodesk Inventor for your VEX Robotics team. Real quickly, we'll just roll through what our agenda is. For our presentation today, we're going to do a quick round of introductions. And then after the introductions, we're going to get into the main presentation. And then we're going to finish up with some next steps, and we're going to give you some additional resources that you can use to be very successful building your robot. So very quickly, my name is Dan Bonnick. I'm an Education Programs Manager, and I've been working with Autodesk products for over 25 years. I'm also a published author. I have 19 books, and I have a couple ebooks that are on the Apple Store as well. Those are free. And joining me on the webinar is John Help. He also works in the education group here at Autodesk as well. So now let's get going in our presentation here. So our objectives for this webinar, we're going to start off and you're going to learn how to control where Inventor is going to be saving and opening files, and that's going to be done through a project file. You're also going to learn how to create new files inside of Inventor. Of course, we're going to learn how to open up files from Inventor and other CAD formats. So we know that you may have other CAD files that you're going to receive. We'll show you how to open up those. And then we're going to spend a lot of time in the sketching environment, how to draw the outline of the part, how to constrain and add dimensions to that profile. And then we'll take that profile and we'll learn how to extrude that to give it depth, and we'll also cover how to revolve a profile. And then once we have that profile extruded or revolved, we're going to go back and we'll learn how to add some holes, chamfer, and fillet features. And then you'll also know how to edit that feature. And then we'll finish up the part environment by learning how to change the material and the appearance of the part. And then we're going to take a look at assemblies. We're going to take these components, as you can see with the gripper arm in the upper right-hand corner, how to assemble those components together. And of course, it's important with a robot that we're going to build, we're going to learn how to find the center of gravity. And then we'll finish off on the documentation, how to create the drawing. So first of all, let's get started. And as I mentioned in the introduction here, a project file inside of Inventor, a project file is what Inventor uses to locate files, where we're going to save them, and where we're going to open them. The key here is that we're going to have a .ipj file for the project file. Now we have a few different file formats that I want you to be familiar with inside of Inventor. So when we're working with part files, you're going to notice that they have a .ipt file extension. When we're dealing with assemblies, it's going to have a .iam. A presentation file, and I'm going to finish off our presentation actually showing you a presentation file, and you're going to use a presentation file to show how components are going to be assembled or disassembled. And then we have drawings, and we can have two different file extensions, a .dwg. .dwg file, anyone with AutoCAD can open up that file directly, or an IDW. So again, those are both Inventor file formats for drawings. And down at the bottom, of course, is the project file that we talked about with .ipj. So when we're going to be creating new files, this is going to be very familiar. Of course, everyone has used Word or Excel or PowerPoint. So we can use the ribbon interface, and you can go back and open up brand new files. But also, when we're going to create the new file, you're going to see a dialog box that's going to appear. You can see that in the image on the right-hand side, where you can select the different unit, in this case, inch or millimeter, and then you can select a specific template that you want. Or we also have a real quick way from the Quick Access toolbar. We can go back from this little drop-down list, and it's going to be a really quick way to go back and create, as you can see, assemblies, drawings, parts, or a presentation file. And of course, opening up files, exactly what you would expect, just like Word or Excel or PowerPoint. The user interface, and I just want to point out a couple different options here. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the Quick Access toolbar. So again, these are going to be very familiar for most of these, just like, again, the Microsoft Office products where we have new, open, save, undo. Then we have the ribbon. So when we're going to start talking about the given commands, I want you to be aware we're always going to be talking about tabs. So these are going to be the options across the very top. Below the tabs, we're going to have panels. So when we're going to give you a specific command, so for example, I wanted to start up the line command, I would tell you here that it's going to be under the Sketch tab. Under the Draw panel is going to be the line command. On the left-hand side is going to be your browser, and I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. On the right-hand side are going to be our navigation tools. Now, the browser is extremely important. Think of the browser, this is going to be your recipe, so when you're creating parts or assemblies, these are going to be the features or the components that are going to build that back up. And one thing that I want to point back out is it's very easy to go back and close the browser. So a common question is, if I close that browser, how do I bring that back? On the lower left-hand corner here, you can see we're going to go under the View tab, Windows panel, and through the user interface. And that's the image on the far right-hand side here. You can quickly bring that browser back. Then on the right-hand side, these are going to be your different viewing operations that we can do. So we have the View Cube, which is a very easy way to go back and change how that appearance is going to look, change your viewpoint. So we have the Home icon, which will take you back to a predetermined isometric view. So by selecting the Home icon right above the View Cube, you can also do a right-click anywhere in the graphics window or press F6 to get back to the home view. With the View Cube, you can also select vertices, you can select planes or edges. And also, again, on the right-hand side are going to be your most common navigation commands that you're going to need. Now, the pan and zoom, for example, the shortcut keys are going to be your wheel. So if you press and hold down the wheel, that's going to be pan, so you can pan the screen back and forth. Zoom, you can roll the wheel in and out to make the parts look larger or smaller. The two shortcut keys that I want to point out for doing the orbit commands is either I can press and hold the F4 key, or I can press down the Shift button and press down the wheel to do a quick orbit to rotate my viewpoint. Start back over into Inventor. So when you first start up Inventor, this is going to be the welcome screen. So from the welcome screen here, I can create brand new parts, I can open up files, I can also adjust the given project file. I am going to be listing here in my recent files, of course, the files that I've been working on here previously. So here is the gripper that we're going to be working on, so I can close that file. So now with projects, I just closed out the welcome screen here. You notice I can bring that back by simply clicking on that welcome icon. Or from the Get Started tab, Launch Panel, I can click on Projects. So let's say that I'm just starting off with Inventor and I want to start managing where my files are going to go. So I'm just going to click on the New icon. And it's going to be a new single user project. Go ahead and click on Next. And I'm just going to give this name. I'm just going to call this VEX. And then where do I want that to go? I'm just going to put that off of my hard drive here on the C. I'll just do C:\VEX. Next. So here I could add a library, and libraries are read-only files. So for the example here, I'm not going to have any, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on Finish. And I'm going to go ahead and have Inventor create that directory for me. And here you can see in my list, I now have the VEX project name with the location being VEX as well. Now, they don't have to be exactly the same. Go ahead and save that. So now let's go ahead and close that dialog box. Now when I go ahead and click on Open, we can see that the file is actually being directed back to that location that I have set there. Also, if I'd go back and create a brand new file, that file, when I save it, is also going to be saved in that location. I'm going to go back to Projects. So if I was given a project that I'm working on with a team, someone sent me some files, I can also go ahead and click on the Browse file. So let's say that the project was already existing. I'm going to go back under my C drive here. I'm going to scroll all the way down. So I have my VEX webinar folder. I can simply double-click on my project file, and it will be added to the list. Let's go ahead and click on Done. So now when I go ahead and open up a file, again, I'll open up that VEX gripper. That's where the location that it was looking for. Now, real quick with the user interface, again, remember we have the quick access toolbar, so we have the save and undo, the tabs, the panels, and then the commands. And of course, on the left-hand side again is the browser. So by clicking on the two horizontal lines that were up there, I can quickly go ahead and I can move the browser around. I can move it back, and I can resize that if needed. And here again, let me just zoom up on here. So if by accident I go back and I close out the browser, which could happen very easily, how am I going to bring that back? So again, by going back underneath the View tab, under the Windows panel, User Interface, go ahead and select Browser to bring that back. Now on the right-hand side, again, are going to be my navigation commands, so I can go ahead and I can select on those planes, edges, vertices, to go back and change the viewpoint. Again, on the right-hand side, I have my different commands for changing the view orientation. And then when I'm all done, again, I can either do a right-click, go back to the home view, press F6, or as I mentioned, just go ahead and click on the home icon right above the view cube. So now that we have the basic project set up and we know where the files are going to be stored, now I want to start sketching the outline of the part. So when I first create a brand new part, the first thing that you're going to see is I'm not going to be in a sketch environment. So when we talk about a sketch environment, think about sketching on a piece of paper. It's 2D. We're going to be sketching in the X and Y plane. So inside of Inventor, whenever we're going to create a brand new part file or create an assembly file or open up a part or assembly, underneath the origin folder, you're going to see that we have 3 different planes that we can select. Now, inside of Inventor, my part file, when I create a brand new sketch, and again, I'll show you a few different ways to do this, the planes that are going to be visible are basically going to be the 3 planes from the origin folder. Then once I have a sketch created, we're going to go through 3 steps. So the first step is going to be sketching the outline of the part. So you can see the basic commands that we're going to have to do the sketching. Now most of the commands that you're going to be using, by the way, are just going to be on the left-hand side with lines, arcs, circles, and one that's not being displayed here is we added some really cool commands inside of Inventor 2014, for example, slots. Then step 2 is adding constraints. So we talk about constraints. Think about this being relationships. So if I sketch a line in an arc, I would like to have those tangent, for example, I can apply a tangent constraint. If I want to have 2 lines be parallel to each other, I can apply a parallel constraint. Then step 3 is adding dimensions. So the nice part here is we're going to use a single dimension command to apply both linear, radial or diameter dimensions or angle dimensions. Now, if you're like me, I like to enter commands with a shortcut key. So the shortcut key for dimension is going to be the letter D. Now, I did mention that step 2 is geometric constraints and dimensions. So that's not a steadfast rule. You can apply dimensions and constraints and go back and forth. So let's get started with this. I'm going to go into Inventor. Now, what I want to do for the next portion here is I want to look at switching out the arm on this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete the arm. Let me take these bolts here and I'm just going to move them away, just so you get a general feel what I want to do here. I want to do a really quick design of what maybe an arm is going to look like that's going to have 4 little fingers sticking out of it. So the cool part here, as long as I'm in here, you'll notice that Inventor is going to allow me to go back and honor my constraints as I push, pull, drag my components back and forth. So again, we'll get to assemblies here in a little bit, but I just want to give you some context of what I want to redesign here. So again, what I want to do now is I want to create a brand new part file. Now, a couple different ways to do this. Again, I can come back up here, click on the new icon, and if I go ahead and I do this, you'll notice that I have my templates on the left-hand side. So I could click on English, be my inch. Go ahead and click on standard.ipt. Now you could double-click on that or click on Create to do that. Or what I prefer, and here let me zoom up on this, from the Quick Access toolbar, if you click on that drop-down, it's very quick. I'm going to just select on the Part option to create a brand new part. So very quick, very easy to go back and do. So just like I mentioned before, so now I'm in my part file, you'll notice that I'm not seeing my sketching tools. Right up at the top, I don't have a tab up here for sketch. And the reason is I'm not in a sketch environment. So we have some different ways to do that. On the left-hand side in the browser, I can go ahead and just click on Create 2D Sketch. I also want to point out one more thing. When the tooltip appears, whenever you see the command option here in parentheses, that's going to be your shortcut key. So of course this would be the letter S for creating a sketch. And some other options here, I could just simply right-click. Now when you do a right-click, the commands that are going to show up right around where you right-click, this is what we refer to as a marking menu. So I'm going to click on the new sketch, and the tools on that marking menu, those are the commands that people are most commonly doing at that point. So let me expand the origin folder here. So from the browser, expand that origin folder so you can see the planes that are being highlighted are directly from that origin. I'm going to select on the XZ. And now I'm in the sketch environment, so you can see that the sketch tab has appeared. And I have my sketching tools. So I'm going to start off, I want to do the line command. So again, you'll notice the shortcut key, the letter L. Or again, I can simply right-click, create line from the marking menu. I'm just going to pan back a little bit, zoom back. I'm going to start up the line command. And I want this to be, let's say, 4 inches long. 4. I'm going to press the tab key. Zoom back here a little bit more so we can see it. Now as I move my cursor, I'm getting direct feedback. So right now when I click, that'll be horizontal. Now I want to do another line. I'm going to come back here and I want this one to be 2 inches long. Now I could go ahead and I could place in an angle dimension if I wanted. But in this case, I'm just going to do some rough sketching for the remainder of this part. But you can notice, as I am sketching here, I'm getting feedback graphically. So right here when I click, you'll notice that the line is going to be perpendicular. Moving my cursor back to the left-hand side, showing that in this case it's now parallel. Now what I want to do, let me zoom up on this, is I want to draw an arc. Now what I could do is I could exit out of the line command, I could come up to the arc command, or we have an easier way to do that. I'm going to move my cursor back over the end point, and you'll notice that the circle turns to a gray circle. I'm going to click and hold down the left mouse button, and as I drag, you can see that it is now an arc, and you can see I also get the preview that it's going to be tangent on both sides. So right-click, go ahead, click OK. Now down on the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you can see that it's showing 5 dimensions are needed. Now what I ultimately want to do is I want to have this sketch fully constrained. So you can see that I have 2 points, and one point is going to be the center of the arc. I'm going to drag that to its origin point. Now I can also move some of these dimensions down, move them out of the geometry. So let's start placing in some dimensions. So as I mentioned, a couple different ways to get here. So I could come back from the Sketch tab, from the Constrain panel, click on Dimension, shortcut key, letter D, or again, simply right-click, press the Escape key first, get out of the command that I was in, General Dimension. I'm going to start off by placing in a radial dimension. And I'm looking at that, say, well, maybe the radius isn't going to fully define what I want there. I really want that to be a diameter. So here's the secret to mastering Inventor. So if in doubt, if you're not seeing what you want on the screen, right-click. And I'm going to do that right-click before I actually place that dimension. So here you can see now I can change that dimension type to diameter, and I'm going to change it to a 1/2 inch. Now I'm still inside of the dimension command. I'm going to place in an angle dimension, but you'll notice as I select that line, it's showing the preview of a horizontal. But I'm going to keep moving my cursor. I'm going to move it over the angle line, and you see that the glyph changes. So and if I pick there, I'm going to get an angle. I want that to be 140. Now you'll also notice a couple things that are happening on the screen. You'll notice the geometry is darker in color when I started adding those dimensions. Now those darker colors, that's showing me that the geometry is constrained. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, this line is not constrained, so I can click and drag and move that around, so it's under constrained. So the lighter color is telling me where I need to go back and focus my attention. So also on the bottom right side, you can see that it's 1 dimension to go. And again, let's start up the dimension command. I'm going to place in an aligned dimension here. So you'll notice as I get my preview, I can preview for a vertical, I can preview for a horizontal. If I move my cursor in, that glyph changes to get aligned. Or like I mentioned before, you can also do a right click and select aligned from the menu. Now, I also want this to be a 1/2 inch. I want this dimension right here to be exactly the same as my diameter. So you notice what I'm doing here is I highlighted the text, the numbers. I'm going to move my cursor over the dimension I want to have a relationship to. And Inventor is automatically going to place in a label. So every dimension in the database is automatically labeled. So it's nothing that we have to do as a user. So D2, go ahead and click on the green check mark to accept that. So you'll notice it is fully constrained. Now let's talk about the parametrics. So parametrics, when I double click on a dimension here, I can simply change its value. So by going down to 3 inches, you'll notice that the geometry changed. So let's do the same thing here for the diameter. So if I change that to 3/4, you'll notice that it's also 3/4 down here with my aligned dimension. So again, I'm going to just double click, change that back down to 1/2 inch. So that's a quick introduction to the sketching side of this. Let's dive into the part modeling. So with the part modeling, first thing that I want to introduce is a really quick way to start up the commands. So I'm going to go through this section here, and you're going to see that there's multiple ways to start up the commands here. So direct manipulation, depending upon the geometry that you select, you're going to get common operations. So the image that I have here with my cursor over right now, it's a sketch, it's just lines. So when I select on that, common operations would be extrude or revolve, or do I want to edit the sketch? If I pick on a plane, what do I want to do? Do I want to edit that feature, edit the sketch, or create a new sketch? If you select on an edge, do I want to do a fillet or a chamfer? Also, I want to point out with the direct manipulation tools, once we're inside of here, you're also going to see options right at the command or the cursor level that is going to be very easy to go back and manipulate the geometry. For extruding, so once we're in the extrude command, again, a couple different ways to get there. You'll notice from the ribbon, of course, we have the extrude command. Shortcut key is going to be the letter E. The extrude will always extrude in the Z-axis based on the sketch. So again, remember the sketch is XY, so we're always going to extrude in the Z. Of course, it could be positive or negative, and we can use the extrude to either join or remove material. And then we'll also do a quick example here for doing revolves. So before doing a revolve, one thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to sketch out our geometry, and when we sketch a geometry to do a revolve, we're going to sketch out 1/4 of a profile. So in an example that I'm going to do here in a little bit, I'm going to do a poly, and you're going to see that I'm only going to be sketching 1/4 of that profile. Now when I start applying the dimension here, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, it's showing up as 0.5, but that's really a radial dimension. So I'm going to show you 2 different methods to change this into a linear diameter dimension. So here you can see it's now 1 inch diameter going halfway to the center. Then once we have our sketch created, I'm going to show how we can go back and simply revolve that. Again, just starting up the command, we can do the same thing from the ribbon. The shortcut key is also going to be the letter R, and again, adding or removing material. I also want to point out that we have primitive features. So you'll notice from the ribbon, if I want to go back and create a plate or a cylinder, there's really no need to go back through and create a sketch and extrude it. We have primitive commands that will take you immediately through all of those steps in an automated fashion. So fillets, of course, fillets are going to be used to round out the components. The shortcut is going to be the letter F. So we're going to use the fillets, obviously, to fillet off edges. And then we'll also take a quick look at chamfers. And chamfers, of course, they're going to create a beveled edge. And one of the simplest ways that I'm going to show to create chamfers, again, is just using the direct manipulation tools. Go back and select on an edge, and then just click on Create Chamfer. We're also going to take a quick look at placing in holes. The shortcut is going to be the letter H. Now, for placing in holes, you're going to have the option for doing drilled, counterbore, spot face, or countersink. Now, once we have that selected, you can change the type to either a tapped hole or an NPT, that would be for pipe, a clearance hole for your knowledge here is going to be where you would actually specify the hardware that's going to go in, and Inventor will recommend the size for that hole. And then throughout my editing of the model here, you're going to see that we're always going to be able to make changes. So I can go back and I can edit the sketch, or I can simply go back and edit the feature, change its size. With Inventor here, everything is going to be very consistent. So with the direct manipulation tools, all we need to simply do is select on that feature and either, again, make the change to the feature level or to the sketch. So let's dive into Inventor here. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to finish out the sketch. A couple different ways to do this. Again, from the marking menu, right-click, finish to the sketch. What I want to do is I want to extrude this. So again, from the ribbon, here's our extrude command, shortcut letter E, or again, the direct manipulation tools, extrude. A couple different methods that are going to be available here. Let me move this back. So we have two different things that are happening. So we have the mini toolbar, or I can also expand the dialog box. Now in the dialog box here, I'm going to change this to symmetric, meaning that it's going to go evenly in both directions. And let me minimize that just to show that it really doesn't matter where we do this. If I do this through the mini toolbar, I'm just going to change the size. Let's do 3/4 of an inch. And go ahead and click on the green check mark to create that. So you'll notice in the browser now is I have my sketch and the feature. So the sketch is consumed once we create that into a feature. So now what I want to do is I want to create some additional features. So here I want to remove some material. So on this planar face, I'm going to just select on that with the left mouse button. I'm going to create sketch. So what I want to do now is I want to create a rectangle. So from the draw panel, we have different rectangle commands. I'm just going to do 2-point rectangle. And then for the size, I want this to be 1.5 inches, so 1.5. Tab, I want to get to the next option, and I want that to be 3/8 of an inch, so 0.375. Do not round. We don't want that to be 0.38. That is not 3/8 of an inch. And enter. So let me go ahead and click OK. And you'll notice right now we're at 2 dimensions to go. So if I click and drag on the geometry, you can see that it will move back and forth, up and down. So what I ultimately want to do is I want to have this rectangle be right in the middle of my extrusion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the project geometry command to project the tangent edge. And let me hold down the shift and the wheel so you can see that that tangent edge is now projected. Let's go back looking planar. I'll just select on the plane on the view cube. Now what I'm able to do is I'm going to talk about some constraints here. So the first one I want to do is I want to apply a coincident constraint. So simply by moving my cursor over the 2 midpoints, those midpoints are now coincident. They're touching each other. So again, you'll notice it's fully constrained. The sketch is all dark. And one more thing that I do want to point out, when your sketch is fully constrained, in the browser, you'll notice a little stick pin. So simply looking at your browser, you can also tell if your sketch is fully constrained. Now again, I could go through the operation here, finish the sketch, get into the extrude, or the shortcut, as I mentioned, is the letter E. So simply by selecting E on the keyboard, you'll notice I'm still in the sketch environment. All my tools are here, but Inventor allows me to start up the extrude. So I'm going to select the profile. And I'm going to just do this from the mini toolbar. I want this to go all the way through. And my operation is going to be a cut, so I want to remove material. And you can see I get the preview. Go ahead and click the green check mark for OK to go back and create that feature. So the part's starting to take shape. I want to remove some more material on the other side here. So again, I'm going to select on that plane, and I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to zoom up so you can see this. I just want to show a little bit more of the line command. I'm going to start up the line command, and what I want to do on this side is I want to draw half of a slot or half of an oblong. So I'm going to move my cursor over the right vertical line, moving my cursor back. Again, 1.5 will be my dimension. Now what I again want to do is draw in an arc, so I'm going to move my cursor back over the endpoint, and you'll notice that the circle goes gray. I'm going to click and hold down the left mouse button while I'm over that point, dragging to the point that it's showing here, and selecting that. Now, not sure if you picked up on that, but if I start clicking and dragging, you'll see that I probably wasn't as accurate as I wanted to be. But the great part is with Inventor, it's not that big of a deal because I can simply come back to add a constraint. So again, from the constraint panel, I'm going to add a tangent constraint by selecting the arc and the line. The order doesn't matter, by the way. And I'm going to add one more constraint. I'm going to add a horizontal constraint going from the center point, and I'm going to find the midpoint of that line. So now those 2 points are aligned horizontally. So now you'll notice that I'm down to 1 dimension to go. So let's add that, general dimension. And I'm going to select the 2 lines. Now what I want this to do is I want this dimension to be 3/8 of an inch. But let's say that, it's late in the day, I'm not quite remembering the decimal equivalent. We can let Inventor do the work for us. I can just do 3/8 for 3 divided by 8. And Inventor will do the math for me. So again, fully constrained. I'm going to go a little bit quicker here, repeating, so E for extrude. We're going to go all the way through. It's to the cut operation already. Place that back in. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to chamfer these edges. So again, I could come back up here and start up the chamfer command from the Modify panel, or, like I said, with the direct manipulation tool, select on an edge. And I'm going to get fillet or chamfer. Of course, I'm going to select chamfer from the list. I'm going to select my 4 different chamfers here. And I'm going to change this down to 1/16 of an inch. So now I have those chamfered. And let's do one more sketch. So you can see that I'm now going to sketch a slot on the angled face here. One more option here, instead of just drawing lines, with Inventor 2014, we've added some slot commands. So I'm going to start off with the very top one, center point. I'm going to move my cursor, find the midpoint. Moving the cursor back down, I again want this to be 1.5 inches. And again, I'm going to lock that back in, so it's going to be perpendicular off that face. And then what do I want for the diameter? In this case, I want that to be 1/4 of an inch. So I'll just type in 0.25. Now the great part here is you'll notice it is fully constrained automatically. So that really made that operation really quick. Again, I'm just going to do E for extrude, select the profile. And again, I want that to go all the way through, removing that material. So the next features that I want to place in, there's going to be 2 holes. If you remember, when I deleted the original arm, there were 2 bars sticking back up. So I need to place in 2 holes to align this. So one operation here that I can do to place in multiple holes at the same time is I'm going to create a sketch. So when I created the sketch, the center point of the arc was automatically projected for me. So all I need to do from the draw panel is I'm going to add a second point. And just like I did before, I'm going to add a constraint. I'm going to add a horizontal constraint. So again, think about selecting those 2 points and joining them horizontally. And let's do a dimension between those. And I want that to be 1 inch. So let's finish the sketch. Now what I like to do is place 2 holes. So again, a couple different ways to do that. Again, from the Modify panel, we have the hole command, shortcut key, letter H. Or if you like the right click, we have the hole command from the marking menu. Now you'll notice when it's previewing here, I'm getting the point that I placed, but not the center point. So I'm going to simply select on that to add that. Now what I'd like to do is let's change the termination here. I want to show this. I'm going to change this to a distance. And I'm also going to change this to a tapped hole. And for the size, let's change this down to, let's say, a number 12. Full depth is fine. Go ahead, click OK. And you can see the preview that it goes all the way through. Now, if I decide to change my mind, so I'm going to come back here. I'm going to select on this planar face. And remember, I'm going to get through the direct manipulation tools, common operation. So I want to edit the extrude. And I'm just going to select on the arrow. Let's make it a little bit bigger, maybe something like that. And you'll notice that the hole looks good, but right until I turn it to its bottom, the hole does not go through. So when we're placing in features, let me go ahead and edit that hole. It's very important to understand the termination. So if it's going to go all the way through the part, just if something changes to the model, change it to through all. So as you can see now, it always goes through no matter what the depth of that extrusion is going to be. And again, I'm going to change this back again to 3/4 of an inch. So now I'm just going to place in 2 fillets. I'm going to select on one of the edges from the direct manipulation. I'm going to select fillet. I'm going to select the back fillet. Again, you can graphically manipulate what that's going to look like, or again, you can just type in a radius. Now again, you could have these as 2 separate features, 2 separate dimensions. But the part is looking pretty good at this point, so let's go ahead and let's save this. I'm just going to save this as arm. Now what I want to do is I want to take a look at changing the material. So a couple different ways to do this. From the application menu, the big I, we have I properties, or the way that I like to get to the I properties is simply right-click on the file name in the browser, I properties. Now, as long as I'm here, because we're going to see this when we get to the drawings, underneath each of these tabs, we have data that we can fill in. This is metadata. So you'll notice that the part number is the file name, but I could add in a description if I want. But for right now, I'm just concerned about the material, so I'm going to change the material here, and let's change this to, let's do cast iron. That'll be good. And you'll see that the mass is updated. You'll notice the center of gravity is automatically displayed. And of course, those numbers, by the way, are from 0, 0, which underneath the origin folder is right there. Now, of course, looking at cast iron, probably not the best material to use with a smaller robot. So another way to go back and make a change here, from the quick access toolbar, we're displaying the different materials. So here I'm going to change this to ABS. And then we have appearance. So think of these appearances as paint. I want to change the color. So let's do that again. So I'm going to go back here, see what it looks like with walnut. Probably not. So from the list here, let's do cadet blue. So now that the part's looking okay, I'm just going to go back up to the quick access toolbar and save. Let me create a brand new part. I realized that I never showed how to do a revolve. So let me simply create a brand new part. And in this case, what I'm going to design up here is going to be just a real simple pulley. So let's say it's going to be 1 inch. And I'm just going to sketch very quickly a quarter profile. Now, what I'm thinking here is the bottom line, let me click and drag and move that down, the bottom horizontal line, this is going to be the line that I'm going to revolve around. Now, again, what I like to do is add constraints first. So I'm going to start off by applying some equal constraints. So I'm going to select the 2 outside lines, apply an equal to the top 2, or I'm sorry, the 2 left vertical lines, the top 2 horizontal, and the 2 angle lines. So what that's doing, that relationship now, if I click and drag, you can see it's maintaining the size. So one side changed, the other side is going to change. So let's start applying some dimensions to this now. So let's again start up the dimension command. So let's come back here. So let's say that this is going to be 1/2 inch. I'm going to place in an angle dimension. So again, just select the 2 lines, place that back in. Let's try 60. Now again, the great part with parametrics is you can change your mind. Of course, we showed before that you can double click on a dimension to change it. Or what if I change my mind? I don't want that angle dimension there at all. So I just press the escape key to get out of the dimension command and delete a dimension by simply selecting on it, select delete on the keyboard. So again, maybe the manufacturer is going to give me the outside dimension here. Let's say it's going to be 3/4. So that would work. So I'm going to place in my diameter dimension. That's my goal. But you'll notice when I first select it and it is being previewed, this is actually a radial dimension. So if I were to go back and again revolve this, it's only going to be showing half. But I want this to be a diameter. So one option is simply to do a right click and from the menu, linear diameter. course, put that in as a given dimension. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that. I'm going to show you an easier way. I'm going to select the horizontal line. I'm going to change this to centerline. So now when I start up the dimension command, by selecting the center line, it will automatically default to linear diameter. Now it doesn't have to be the first line with the center line. As long as it's one of the lines that's selected, it'll automatically place that back in. So now again, let's finish the sketch. So let's go ahead and revolve that. So with the center line, Inventor automatically picks up that center line and revolves it 360 degrees for my component here. So there's my pulley. And last thing I want to do maybe is I want to add in a hole. So let's start up the hole command. I'm going to change the placement to concentric. Now I do want to point out one item here to helping you master Inventor. Whenever you see arrows that are red, that's Inventor's way of telling you that you need to do something. So with the blue background, that's current. So the first thing I need to do is select the plane and then the concentric reference. So the plane, you notice once I selected that, that arrow is no longer red, but the concentric reference still is red, and it's now blue. I want that to be concentric to that circular edge. Select your size, and termination, let's go all the way through, probably would be the best. Rotate my viewpoint, and there's my pulley. So I just wanted to quickly go back, realize I forgot to show that. So let's talk about assemblies. So now that we have all of our components designed, or at least enough of them to assemble, what do we do, right? So creating assemblies, and we already talked about creating new files. So we could go back and create a brand new assembly file or start up a new assembly file. So once we are in that assembly file, the command that we're going to use is going to be the place component command. And the shortcut key is going to be the letter P. You can see that we're just going to navigate back out, find that file, and place it. Now once that file is placed, what we want to do is start creating relationships back between faces, edges, points between different components. And again, we're going to do this with assembly constraints. Now the shortcut here is the letter C. Now I didn't show this when we were at the part environment before, when we were sketching, but the shortcut for letter C is also circle. So when you're in your different environments, the different letters can mean different things. Now with constraints, we're just going to talk about a couple of these. And the first one is going to be the mate constraint. So the mate constraint, when you start selecting faces, as shown in the example here, you're going to see a surface normal will appear. So with the mate, shown in the two examples here on the left-hand side, these two images, when you select the two surface normals with mate, the normals are going to go in towards each other. If you change this to a flush solution, the normals are going to be going in the same direction. So you can see that in the example on the far right-hand side. Again, I'm going to show this here in a couple seconds. Then we have the insert constraint. The insert constraint is a great tool to go back and use if you want to assemble two circular components. So for example, I want to place in a bolt or a pin into a hole. So simply by selecting two circular edges, Inventor is going to align the two circles and align them centered. And the only thing that the component will be able to do when we're done is rotate. And then we'll also take a quick look at center of gravity. So we looked at that when we were in the eye properties, so we can see the XYZ data, but I'm also going to show you how we can turn on the visibility of the center of gravity, where we're going to see planes and points where you can go back and start measuring to that. So now let's go back to the assembly here. So now what I want to do is I want to place in that arm. So again, a couple different ways to do that. I'm only going to show one today. So from the place component, I'm going to select my arm that we just created. Go ahead, click on open. And I'm going to place in one occurrence of that. Now with previews, I could place in two arms if I wanted to place in the other one, but for now I'm just going to place in one. And I'm going to come back here. I'm going to use the free rotate command. I'm going to select on that arm. And the reason I like to do this is I can quickly change my viewpoint so I can see the face that I want to constrain to, instead of having to change the viewpoint for the entire assembly, I can just rotate one component around. So again, what I want to do next is start applying some assembly constraints. So from the relationships, constraints, shortcut letter C, it's also available as a right click. So you'll notice the surface normal to this surface normal. Now, as those are going to be displayed here, you'll notice that it's the mate solution that I talked about. If I change that to a flush, you'll see the normals are going in the same direction. So of course, in this case, I probably really do want that to be mated, so I'll apply that. And I also want to apply two more. I'm going to do center line to center line, apply. Now I'm just going to cancel out of here so you can see what Inventor is doing. So right now, Inventor is honoring the assembly constraints that I just applied. So let's do one more. So again, right-click, constraint. I'm going to do center line to center line and apply. So now you can see as I move the arm, or the inside arms there, it's honoring that. So now let's quickly place in these bolts. I'm going to select both bolts. I'm just going to hold down the control key. I'm going to, again, rotate both of these with the free rotate command. And start up the constraint command. I'm going to change this to insert. So if you recall, with insert, all I'm going to do, just getting tight, I'm going to select two circular edges, apply. Now the only thing that these bolts can do is they can rotate in the holes. So let's select that bottom nut, place that back in here. And the last one. And apply. Now, looking at my design, I have a little bit of an issue. So either I need to lengthen the bolts or make the part a little bit thinner. Now, a couple ways that I could do this is I want to open up that component. I can right-click over the component. It will highlight. I can select Open from the menu. Or, since I already have that component open, you'll notice the tab down at the bottom is for the arm. So again, let's make some changes. So the first thing, let's go ahead and edit the extrude. And I'm going to make that 5/8 of an inch. And I also want to change out the sketch. So I'm going to edit the sketch. And I want to minimize the size here a little bit. I'm going to change that back down to 3/8 of an inch. Again, remember our relationship that we placed with the align dimension. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that change, go back to the assembly. So you'll notice that the part was changed. That looks good, but now you'll notice that the bolts and the nuts, they're not quite in the place that they should be. But in the quick access toolbar, right up here, I now have my local update button is pending. So by simply selecting on that local update, Inventor will reapply those constraints, and everything is looking really good. Now let's take a quick look at our center of gravity. So again, remember, we can simply right-click, get to the eye properties under the physical tab, do an update, and this will give us our numeric XYZ data. I also have the option to go back here under the View tab, then under the Visibility panel, select Center of Gravity. Now, just like I mentioned before, here I have my Measure Distance option from the Quick Access toolbar. If I wanted to, I could maybe select this plane. I could select the plane of the center of gravity, get my dimensions. I can also restart that. Now, if you want to get to the physical center point, if you let your cursor just sit in one area for just a second, you're going to get the option to go back and display the edges, the faces that are below that. We refer to this as the Select Other tool. So you'll notice as I scroll back through here, I'm finding all of the different options that are available to me. Of course, where I selected, there are a bunch. But just realize that you can get to the center point just by using that Select Other command. Now to turn off that center of gravity, just select that option. Now what I want to do is I just want to close out this assembly and just show you what it looks like in a completed state. And again, you'll notice that the arms with all of the constraints and the gears, everything works. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So John, any pending questions?
People would like to see gear creation. I think that might be something we could do a video of at a later point and post to the site.
Yeah, we're probably not going to have enough time to show the gear generation. One of the last slides here, there are definitely different videos that you can go back and take a look at for placing in gears. So all of our design accelerators are included with Inventor. So the last section here is going to be creating drawing views. Inventor makes this really easy. So we're going to start by creating our new drawing. So we'll assume that we're inside of our drawing, and we're going to use the base view command to go back and place in our first view, and we're going to be able to project orthographic views and also isometric views. So that's what's showing down here, orthographic and isometric views. So that's going to be really quick. And then I'm going to show you a couple different methods for placing in dimensions. We can retrieve the sketch dimensions if we want. We can also place in associative dimensions. Very similar to what we just did in the sketch environment. The only difference here is that they're just going to reflect the length of the geometry that you're going to select, and I'll show you a couple different ways there. We can also place in hole and thread notes. So you notice that we have a couple holes that are placed in there. Inventor is keeping track of all of that, so we'll have it automatically generate that for us. And then we're going to take a look at the assembly side, how to place in balloons. And then we're going to finish up by placing in a parts list. And we're also going to refer back to the I properties and how we can complete our parts list with the bill of materials. So let me go back into Inventor here. I'm going to start up a new drawing. And like I said, the first thing I want to do is I want to start up the base view command. Now, from my list here, since I have two files that are open, I have an option to select either of them. Now, if I don't have a given file open, simply go ahead and select on Open an Existing File icon, and then you can navigate out and select that. Now, with the scale on the lower left-hand side, I can change the size of that view. As you can see, I get it dynamically updating, show me what it's going to look like. I'm going to keep that at 1:1. I'm going to move my cursor to the right, to the top, and to the upper right to place in an isometric view, and then right-click, Create. Now once my views are created, you can see that I probably have the wrong size sheet of paper. So if you look at this, this is a C-size sheet of paper, so I'm going to quickly change that. In your browser, I'm going to simply right-click on Sheet 1, Edit Sheet, and I'm going to change the size down to a B-size sheet. All right, so that's looking better. Now what I like to do is shade my isometric views, and that's really easily done. Just simply double-click in that view. I'm going to change the style to shaded. So that's looking good. Now I'm going to change the tool set here. I'm going to make the Annotate tab current. And the first thing that I like to do is place in some center lines. You see that we have 4 different options for placing in center lines. I'm going to place in a couple center marks off the holes. And just to show something different here, let's come back off that fillet as well. Now what I'd like to do is retrieve dimensions. So with the retrieve command from the dimension panel, I'm going to select the view. Then I'm going to select all of my dimensions. I'm just going to draw a crossing box around here. And all of the dimensions that were created from all of the sketches are being displayed here. Now, you'll notice I have some duplicates because it's bringing back dimensions from all of the sketches. So now I can start moving these around manually if I wanted to. And you'll notice as I'm moving the text, I have a center line. As soon as that center line goes to dots, that's telling me that that text is centered. I'm also going to remove some of these other dimensions that I don't need. So later, like I said, we're going to place in a hole note, so I'll remove that. So let's say everything else looks pretty good now. Again, I could manually start to adjust where these dimensions are located, or I can get a little bit further along quickly by clicking the Arrange command. Just going to, again, draw a crossing box all the way around, right-click, OK. Now, of course, I have some dimensions out here. I'm just going to simply pull these back. I don't need that angle out there. So very quick way to go back and arrange your dimensions automatically. Now let me show you a couple other options here. Let me delete these. I'm just going to, again, do a crossing, press delete on the keyboard, and just clean this up here. Let's get rid of this dimension for now. Let's move this dimension up here. So it's down there. All right. Now some other options here. For example, if you wanted to, you could come back and just place in a single dimension. So again, shortcut is the letter D, just like we've learned before. And I could place in the overall dimension. Go ahead, click OK if I wanted to. Or, yeah, let me go ahead and do that. Just click OK. But what if you wanted to go back, just simply double click on a dimension, just like you were in the sketch environment. I'm going to place in, this is going to be a reference dimension. Go ahead, click OK. Now some other commands that we can utilize here, instead of placing dimensions one at a time, from the baseline, click on Baseline Set. I'm just going to zoom in tight here, so it's a little bit easier to see. Select a couple of different line segments here. Maybe I'll select the arc over here, right-click, Continue. Now as I move the cursor back up, I'm getting a preview. So maybe I'll change my mind. I'm going to right-click over the left extension line and say, that's what I want. I want all of those dimensions placed off the left-hand side. And right-click, go ahead and create that. Now that I'm looking at that, saying that's probably not what I want. But the great part here, by using the set command, you notice as I move my cursor, they're all grouped together. So I'm simply going to move my cursor over the right side extension line, right-click, make origin, simply changes that. Now I also don't want a dimension here to a hidden line, so I'm going to delete, oops, let me undo that. Let me right-click, and I want to delete member. Now you'll notice I still have a gap here, so again I can manually move those up or down, or simply right-click, arrange, and Inventor will go back, use your current dimension style that you have for your distance between, and automatically adjust those. And like I mentioned, I probably don't need that 1.5 over here. And the last thing I want to do is I'm going to take my 1/16 of an inch dimension here, move that to the other side. And again, this is going to be a typical dimension. So again, I'll just double click on that. And let's make this typical. So that's a quick overview on placing in our drawing views, placing some dimensions at the part level. So now let me do one more thing. I'm going to create another new, and I'll just show a different way here. So under English, I can come back down here, and if I wanted to create a DWG, so remember DWG, that would be someone that has AutoCAD. They could open up that file directly, or ANSI-inch.idw, and that's what I'm going to do here. Go ahead, click on Create. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before for the part, except I'm going to do for the assembly file. Go ahead and we'll place that back in. Now what I'd like to do here, I'm just going to move this top view down just a little bit. I'm going to double click. I'm going to shade my isometric view. Again, I could go back under the Annotate tab, add a dimension, or again, everything's going to be right at your right click. So for example here, maybe I want to show in my example here the overall height. Go ahead and do that. If I wanted to, I could maybe place in a reference dimension here. So again, you would go through that same process that you did with the part environment that you would with the assembly side here. Now, what I want to do next is I want to start placing in balloons. Now, I'm also going to place in a parts list here, and I'm a little concerned that I'm not going to have enough room here. So I'm just going to simply double-click on the drawing view here, and I can select a different scale for the view. Well, that's maybe a little small. So I'm going to type in my own. I want that to be 3/4. Since it's an isometric, it's really only there for display. I don't have to be a specific size. Now let's place in some balloons. Again, from the Annotate tab, here I'm going to go under the Table panel, Balloon. We have two commands. So Balloon for placing in single balloons, or Auto Balloon for placing in multiple. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a crossing window, select all of the components, select on the Select Placement button, and you see that I'm getting some previews here. Do I want to align those horizontally? Vertically, you can adjust the spacing if you want between them, or we'll go all the way around. Let me just back off here a little bit so you can see this. So that's looking pretty good. You get a preview. Go ahead, click OK. Now, the balloons are automatically applied to that. So you notice balloon number 24, but if I move that to another component, it's automatically renumbered. Now, these numbers are coming from the assembly, so the order that these components were put in the assembly is what's being reflected here. Now, looking at this, I'm noticing that I have a little bit of an issue. So when this assembly was put together, there were some components that are either hidden or that were removed. So I'm going to do some renumbering here. But before I do that, let me go ahead and place in a parts list. So again, from that same table panel, parts list, select the view, click OK. I'm going to place in the parts list. So looking at my parts list, where is Inventor getting all of this data? So if I double click on the parts list, remember the part number and the description, that's all coming from the eye properties. So we'll notice here that the description is missing for the arm that we placed in. But before I go back and change that here, let's take a quick look at renumbering these. So again, starting off with item 7, I don't want that. But inside of our parts list, it's real quick. Just click on renumber items. It'll go back 1 through 9. Then the balloons are automatically relabeled for me. Again, you could come back here, spend your time reorientating your balloons as needed. Now, to finish this off with the description, again, I could simply double-click on the parts list. I could come back in here. I could type in a description if I wanted to. So let me go back to the VEX. Let me open up this file. So again, iProperties, project, so description. So let's call this arm blue. And again, we'll save that. Now let's go back to the drawing, and you can see that it says arm blue. Now, the downside to doing what I just did is you could have, 30, 40, 50 different parts that you would have to open up and do that to. That would be a lot of work. An easier way is simply right-click on the parts list, Bill of Materials. Then from the Bill of Materials, we're going to get a dialog box that's going to show all of the properties of all of the components. So here you'll notice arm blue. So let's call this arm finger blue. Now I'm going to save this back. Now once I save the drawing, I'm also going to be prompted here, do I want to save that change back to the individual files that have been affected by the change to the eye properties? So now when I go back to the individual part file, just to prove that that data has absolutely been written back. So everything is fully associative with your parts and your assemblies and your drawings. And then one last thing that I wanted to just show you, underneath the presentation file folder here, once your assembly is done, you may want to go back and actually create a file here that's going to show how components are going to be assembled or disassembled. And that's what a presentation file is going to do. So let me just start up the animation, start playing this. So this presentation file is going to have a file extension of .ipn. And you can also go ahead and you can create drawing views back off of that. So I just wanted to show you what the last file that Inventor can create, what that does here. So let's cancel out of that. All right, so let's wrap this up. So some additional resources that we've been mentioning here. Under the Resources tab, there is VEX curriculum that you can get to. There was a great question that came up about the creation of gears. So Inventor has a set of commands called the design accelerators. If you go to the youtube.com user Autodesk Ed for education, search for design accelerators. So being a student or a mentor or a teacher, for your personal computer, you can download Autodesk software for free on your personal computer. So go to students.autodesk.com. Currently, there are over 40 titles up there. The new licenses that you're going to download from there are valid for 3 years, and you're going to be in very good company. There's over 7.2 million people that have joined. So if you're not a member of that site, all you need to do is register, and it is free. And then talking about more curriculum here, so obviously what we covered in this webinar was just to get you going in the right direction. There's a lot of additional resources that are available. So if you go to autodesk.com/digitalsteam, you're going to go back and you're going to be able to find curriculum in regards to science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Of course, that equals the STEAM portion of this based on all of the different Autodesk products. You'll also notice right in the middle of the screen here is the VEX Robot Gripper. So this was the main assembly file that I started to change. So if you want to see how to model up this gripper, you can go under Digital Steam, and up till November 15th, this is going to be the link to the file. After the 15th, it'll just be found right on Digital Steam. All right, so we will finish up the webinar. Again, I want to thank everyone for their time.